pulsing motor with torque.
Good day to you. I've decided to use the name for this particular experiment as Daft Man, because I must be daft getting involved with this kind of thing in the first place. But after seeing a few videos on YouTube, I started to get a bit inquisitive and decided to go on, I'll have a go then. Let's see what all this hype is, whether it works or not. So here we go. I've actually got two coils. I don't know if you can actually see that. 22 SWG, 26 SWG and a 28 SWG, 500 turns. That's 500 turns, bipolar, I think that's what you lot refer to it as, on that coil, and the same on that coil. Now, as you can obviously see from what I've said and what I've just said, I've got three tapped outputs. One is the actual pulse, one would be the trigger circuit, and one is a generation circuit. But obviously the trigger circuit also generates power as well. Same with that coil there, exactly the same as what I've just described. Underneath, I don't really want to tip it up, but underneath, I don't know if you can actually see that, there's some magnets flying around. It's just tripping reed switches. So the only difference with mine is you'll probably see that capacitor at the back and wondering what that's for. Right, well the first motor, which is the drive motor, which is what I refer to it as, just so for clarity, actually drives, the outputs of those go down into the bridge rectifier here, which then goes off and charges that capacitor. I shouldn't put my fingers too close to that, it's quite high voltage at the moment. Which then goes into the second trigger circuit, which is on that board at the back, that triggers that motor. So, the output of the two generation sides of that motor go into the rectifier, charge that capacitor, triggers the second circuit, then I tap the output off the second circuit into the next bridge rectifier, which then charges this battery. This battery has just come off charge this morning. It was about, I don't know, I think it's about 9-10 volts, and it's now charging, just to show you, that's the reading from that battery. It's now charging, it's actually, I've got to put some sort of regulator, it's actually overcharging very slightly. It went to 14 volts a few minutes ago. But you can see 1381 there. The supply battery is 1198 solid, and that's the current it's actually using at the moment. So, for some unknown reason, mine keeps speeding up a little bit and slows down a little bit. I'm assuming it's when the capacitor starts using the current, and it just seems to do this sometimes. I don't know why, but something I've got to look into. Maybe it's just a bearing that's starting to wear or overheat. It has been running for, oh god, it's got to be running for months now, non-stop this has. I have actually got a little electronic circuit that I normally have on this that switches the batteries over. So when this one runs down to about 8 volts, it switches over to the next battery and swaps the charge over at the same time. So it just keeps swapping the battery, flip-flopping if you like, and keeps the whole thing running. The problem is, if you let the batteries run too low, and I've noticed this, if I let this battery here run down to about 2 volts, and then put a new fully charged battery on, which is what I normally use, a pair at the back there, and I let them charge up, I find that it doesn't charge that battery back up fully. So over a period of time, the whole thing comes to a grinding halt. If I reset the voltage detection for the switch circuit to detect the voltage drop at about 8 volts, and then swap over, the thing will just run for months. I've actually had to stop it in the end because it's just getting on my nerves, running it back at the shed. So it's actually been running for many months, and I've only just finally plucked up courage to put it on YouTube, if you like.
But now we're going to briefly touch on what Richard was talking about in his last programme, the Stan Myers cell. And this again is another electrolytic process used for electrolysing water. And it uses a high frequency pulsed circuit. It generates high frequency pulses of electricity into the electrolysis process. Seems to have some kind of feedback mechanism as well. We've come to that conclusion that Maya built into the electronics some sort of feedback components which he didn't put in the patent. The process, when you electrolyse it, yields hydrogen, raw hydrogen, and you then can burn that hydrogen in much the same way as you can burn the vapour from a gasoline, from petrol, in an engine to produce energy. The energy released in the burning of the hydrogen as heat seems to be greater than that used in the electrolysis process to produce it, and that's what apparently has been done. The hydrogen can be produced on demand and does not need to be stored. That's the key thing in the Maya cell. All the hydrogen cars that you hear about in the media, or the majority of them, they all require the car having a tank which you fill up in the same way as you fill up a tank with gasoline. But the Maya cell would produce hydrogen on demand. In other words, if you put more current into the cell, it will produce more hydrogen. So if you've got your foot on an accelerator in a car, you could regulate that current going into the cell, then get more hydrogen, and so on. And I've got another clip here about the Maya cell.
Well, it was during the oil embargo of the United States. It alarmed me that a little country over in the Far East could actually cripple the United States. And realizing that the entire industrial base of the United States and the world is based on the supply and the utilization of energy, it became imperative that we must try to bring in an alternate fuel source and do it very quickly. Of course, I thought originally with the right type of funding, we could possibly get it in within 6 months. But reality shows that the 12 to 15 years was more correct in this projection.
Back in the 70s, Stan Meyer set out single-handedly to solve America's energy problems. He decided to do it using water, the world's most abundant storehouse of hydrogen, which is a far more powerful fuel than oil. For 15 years, Meyer has been fighting to get his inventions taken seriously.
Most inventors have to be a loner. You have to be somewhat thick-skinned and don't rely on other people to support you, because they will not. More times than not, an invention is really stolen from the inventors. Even in my prior development of high technology, I've had patents taken from me. I learned from the School of Hard Knocks to be very cautious.
Meyer has always stood out against the crowd. He has no formal qualifications as a scientist because he didn't wait to graduate from high school, leaving early to go straight into research at the high-powered Battelle Institute in his native Ohio. Now he works full-time as a private inventor. He's built a device with potentially revolutionary implications. There is nothing startling about a machine that can extract the hydrogen from water. What is highly unusual is that it should do so with ordinary tap water. The conventional method is called electrolysis. Meyer has turned that process on its head. Unlike electrolysis, his device doesn't use up large amounts of electric current, nor does it produce an enormous amount of waste heat. For 20 years, he has been refining a method to fracture water, which produces vast amounts of hydrogen on demand. This is not his latest apparatus. He was unwilling to let us point a camera at that. This is the simple device he used to convince a reluctant patent office that his revolutionary concept actually works. Alloy rods, acting as electrodes, are housed in a perspex container that's filled with water. Normal mains voltage is fed in through a transformer, but critically, there is virtually no current consumed, less than half an amp. The result is dramatic. Hydrogen pours off with the flick of a switch. Meyer claims the key is his electronics, which pulses electricity rapidly across the rods at up to 20,000 cycles per second. In a way that's not readily apparent, this process transforms the equation. Whereas in conventional electrolysis, 3 times as much energy is consumed as is produced in the form of hydrogen fuel, in Meyer's apparatus, the reverse is true. It appears to produce several 100% more energy than it consumes.
Stan has something that's characteristic of the people that sound like they've done something to tap zero-point energy. Has high frequency, high voltage, and there's a combination of the two at which something occurs. With Chinetsky in Russia, it was what he called a self-sustaining discharge. The tube would run by itself. When Stan gets this effect, the amount of hydrogen and oxygen that are emitted off these two electrodes is a step function. It almost boils the water. If I did this with standard electrochemicals, I need current, and the water should rise a degree every couple of seconds. With Stan's, it'll run for a half hour, and the water temperature hasn't changed. Something's different.
Meyer demonstrates this repeatedly without any difficulty, and yet on the face of it, it represents an extraordinary revolution. His measurements over the years suggest 1,700% greater efficiency than conventional electrolysis. And, if he's to be believed, he's getting much better results from his latest, still secret invention.
Well, I first got involved with Stan Meyer when I went over there with a couple of colleagues to look at his water-splitting device. And so we arrived at Stanley Mayer. He had a demonstration cell. We filled it with tap water. In fact, I did that myself. And he switched it on, and almost instantly there were 3 jaws dropped because of the rate at which the gas poured off. It was quite spectacular.
Whatever energy source Stan Meyer had tapped, it was not explicable by the electric power that was going into it. So something was powering it outside of conventional wisdom.
There is no question that the gas coming off in such abundance is hydrogen. Meyer ignites it to produce a high-temperature flame able to cut through metal.
Stanley Mayer has faced a lot of difficulties. He's 3 times tried to launch the device and produce press conferences, had the technical press round, but he's been almost universally slated. In the early days, very much so, they just ridiculed the whole idea. He's getting a little more notice now because some scientists are getting interested. But by and large, science is very intolerant, particularly modern science.
As with Tesla, Griggs and others, Meyer's claims are so far outside the received scientific wisdom that they've been ignored by the majority of the scientific establishment. But then, Meyer has ignored them too. He has poured his energies over the last 10 years into establishing recognition for his claims by getting international patents.
In the processing, there was a great deal of difficulty in trying to process the legal paperwork in such a way as to allow the Patent Office to fully understand what was actually occurring. In one instant, we brought the water fuel cell to Washington, D.C., and of course I had tweaked it in such a way to produce an enormous amount of hydrogen, oxygen, gas, and the patent examiner said, no, it will not work based on the electrolysis process. And when we turned it on and produced an enormous amount of hydrogen and gas, the examiner finally realized that we were doing exactly that, and went out in the hallway and started screaming and hollering to everybody on the floor, put out all your cigarettes, hydrogen's in the building. So we started laughing and said, well, we certainly convinced everybody in the patent office that we can do what we said we can do.
Even so, the US Patent Office dragged their feet for 3 years before granting patents on the hydrogen-producing device. Since then, against massive resistance, he's managed to get patents established throughout Europe and Japan. But the hydrogen machine was only the first step towards Meyer's ultimate dream. If he gets it right, this application of his technology would change the 21st century in the same way that the Wright brothers and Carl Benz transformed the 20th. He is currently modifying a beach buggy to run on nothing but water. It doesn't have a petrol tank or even a hydrogen container. It has just a tank of water. He's invented a device called a water splitter to replace the spark plug. As the water is injected into the engine, Meyer claims it's fractured into hydrogen and oxygen and then burned as fuel. Meyer is working on a kit to modify any engine. He hopes to demonstrate it on this car within 12 months.
And of course, the blessing to the use of the water as a fuel source, that on combustion, the byproduct is water mist. So we're even solving the environmental pollution problem at the same time that we're using water to maintain the industrial basis of the world.
Meyer is protective about his inventions to the point of self-confessed paranoia. Most observers describe him as a crank and his car as an aberration. If only a fraction of what Meyer claims for his technology can be achieved, it would represent a vindication for NASA's involvement. It would also be a powerful threat to many entrenched vested interests.
If Stan Meyer's device works, like he advertises, you would make energy available universally, almost free. That is a major, major, major impact.
When new technology comes in existence, there's a great resistance to it because it can affect a lot of economic factors. In this particular case in the United States, we pay out roughly about $200 billion a year for foreign oil. It's quite obvious that the Arabs would pay $200 billion to try to keep this type of technology out of the economy. And many times over the last decade, I have been offered enormous amounts of money to simply sell out or to sit on it. The Arabs offered me well over $1 billion cold cash, simply to sit on and do absolutely nothing with it. My life has been threatened many times. Of course, I happen to believe in the power of angels. And if I don't believe in the power of angels, I don't believe I'll be around here too long.
Is it possible, as well as an engine for a car, you could use it for an engine for lifting things?
You could use it for anything because you just have to convert the energy into whatever form. You could use it to, you could use the hydrogen energy when you burn it to charge up batteries and then put those batteries into whatever, you know, you could do anything with it.
Is it possible that's been invented before?
Oh, well, yeah, that's what we're coming to. You know, the people that run the world know all about this. They know all about it. You know, it's not just, I mean, a lot of people think it's just the economics. No, it's not just that. That's one big factor, yes, but it's not the only factor. And here we have another one, the HHO gas generator. I've got another news clip, but I'm going to move on, else we're going to run out of time. Similar sort of thing, this device splits water and produces HHO gas. It seems to be something similar to the Maya technology. This website is still going. They've actually used the HHO gas for a welding process. But I'm not going to have time to play that. Because otherwise we're going to run out of time. But I'd say I've got the DVDs at the back if anybody wants more. You can watch it on my website. You don't even have to buy a DVD because I've got this presentation on my website. Check the evidence.
Didn't you mention that Meyer did get killed?
He did. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. Yes, Meyer ended up... He was approached by the Pentagon and they said, oh, well, we'd like to use some of your technology in our tanks or something to power them. And he said, OK. And shortly after meeting with them, he came out of a restaurant having had a meeting with 2 Belgian investors, says I've been poisoned and dropped dead in the car park. That was in 2003.
Did they discover what he was poisoned with?
No, I don't know anything more about that. Again, you can go and read it.
He ordered a glass of iced tea, and his brother was there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
He drank the iced tea, and he looked at his brother, and he said, my God, they've killed me. He got up, and he ran for the parking lot to try to get to the car to get to the hospital, and he was dead when he hit the deck. So probably some form of deadly cyanide. Something
we don't know, but yes, he ended up dead in the same way that Eugene Malov ended up dead, and Bruce Palmer. And this is all part of the cover-up. In other words, if they don't get you by the legal bit, the financial bit, or you know, just general sort of harassment, and they don't get you by burning down your workshop and stealing all your equipment, they'll kill you. You know, I've got a slide that basically says that. Why, oh why would anyone want to cover up cheap energy sources? Why have we got an environmental movement? I mean, you know, I almost want to, you know, go up to these Marks and Spencer's truck drivers. This truck has been streamlined, you know, to save energy. And say, do you know what's written in the city of truck is a load of rubbish. Rubbish. And it goes back to what Neil was saying. We've all been conned by the media because of this repetition, CO2, you know, all this rubbish about that. But this is what's behind it.
You're sounding angry.
Wouldn't you? Yeah, I'm surprised I'm angry, you know. Surprised more people aren't. The energy industry is probably, as it said in that clip, the biggest global industry of all. Oil, gas, coal mining and prospecting are huge, expensive operations. The vested interests are enormous. Everyone needs energy, even the governments of the world. Even medium to large scale use of more conventional technologies, such as the basic electric car running on conventional battery technology, seem to have been terminated as early as possible. See the film Who Killed the Electric Car? That was in the thing in the 90s. Well, you can go and look at the story Who Killed the Electric Car. There's a new car just come out called the Tesla One, which is also came out, was announced a few days ago. That uses a solar charger and some battery system. There's no gas in it, and you can drive it at 100 miles an hour for 200 miles or something. So I think that's going to get cut down as well. but we'll see. Maybe it won't. Now, national security was brought up. Physicist and engineer Dr. Tom Valone worked at the US Patent Office, and in a 2001 email to Gary Vesperman, he has stated, "As a former patent examiner, I can tell you that the number of securitized patents in the vault at the Patent Office Park 5 building is closer to 4,000 or more. They never receive a patent number, and the inventor is rarely, if ever, compensated by the government for use of the invention. The US Patent Office has a 9-member committee that screens patents for national security implications. A hidden purpose of this committee is also to screen energy-related patents which could threaten the power and fossil fuel companies." So the fix is in already, folks. Same, I'm sure it's the same in the UK.
Do not patent things.
Okay, the other problem is this.
Government complex.
The academic government complex, as Mallet calls it.
The academic government complex, not the military-industrial complex, as much as the academic government complex is against new scientific ideas that threaten the foundations of their work. And they, no matter how many papers are published, I don't care whether they're on the internet or not on the internet or where they are, the establishment academic government complex is brain dead.
I mean, why can't they open their arms and say, "This is exciting, let's try it, let's experiment, and let's jump in it"?
Well, it's remarkable. I must tell you, George, 15 years, almost 15 years now, after that fateful day of March 23rd, 1989, I continue to evolve in my understanding of the emotional and psychological and intellectual armoring, to borrow a term from the famous Wilhelm Reich, that scientists have. It's astounding. One physicist at MIT, whose name is Dr. Hermann Feshbach, one of the world's foremost nuclear physics people. Now he's deceased. But at MIT, as I was finishing up my time there as a senior person in the MIT news office as a science journalist, he had played a role in getting rid of a major article that was going to appear in the MIT magazine, very influential magazine called Technology Review. It's on newsstands all over the place. He said to me, "I've had 50 years of experience in nuclear physics, and I know what's possible and what's not possible." And then that was it. That was his total statement, which I would cite forever as a statement, a kind of statement that should never come out of the mouth of any person who considers themselves a legitimate scientist. They're not a scientist if they say, based on previous knowledge and theory that I have, I know for all time what is possible and what's not. That's obviously crazy.
And as you see there, Malov wrote this book, Fire from Ice. He left MIT in disgust when he discovered that they'd falsified their results about cold fusion when MIT tried to reproduce Pons and Fleischmann's work. And he set up the New Energy Foundation, I think in the 90s sometime, with Steve Crivet and a few other guys. And they were trying to get funding for small-scale things like cold fusion experiments, organoaccumulator experiments, and other related technologies. And apparently they got a group of guys together and they were going to make a presentation to Congress. And then he was murdered, apparently in a bungled burglary at his parents' house that he was renting out. And he was murdered on 17th of May 2004, about 3 months after that recording was made. So again, they got to him as well. So it seems. And again, I'll just go back to this. Bruce De Palma's words from that clip before, the CIA operates through various innocent-looking fronts to find out what people are thinking and what they're inventing. Now, what's more innocent than the benign institute founded on transcendental principles to help New Age inventors bring energy to the free energy into the world? If free energy technology was not real, these operations would not be needed. And I've already mentioned Edgar Mitchell, and I think, I've played that clip already. So that brings us to Seize Power and Stephen Greer. I'm sure a few people in the room have heard of Stephen Greer. Yeah? Well, that's how I got into all of this, actually, in 2003 when I discovered this disclosure project that he put together. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. How the hell did he do that? And then the big, sort of link that he made in my brain was that the UFO cover-up was to do with energy, not aliens, or not necessarily just aliens, but with energy. If people begin to realise that these craft that are coming here, what do they run on? Do they run on, what energy system do they use? Coal, oil, gas, nuclear? No, clearly not that, if you look at all the evidence. And he set up this thing called SEAS Power, Space Energy Access Systems, in 2001. And he basically says, all right, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to set up a website, inventors come to me, and I'll connect you with investment funds.
It wasn't created on September 11, 2001, was it?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it was before that. It could have been. I don't know.
Something to look at.
But he basically said, use the UFO technology that was known about in black projects to get